hockey. Jeff, you ready to talk some hockey?
Anytime we can talk to Charlie, I'm happy.
Lead writer for The Athletic for the Philadelphia for the Flyers, Charlie O'Connor joins us. Charlie, thank you so much for your time. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing all right. Hope you guys are doing well too.
We are doing as well as possible with everything that's going on. Crazy week in the sports world, crazy week for you to follow in the NHL. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you saw from your perspective? We saw games, then we saw a stoppage. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, yesterday, obviously, the NHL players, spearheaded the decision to essentially take a 2-day pause to obviously, I guess, shine a spotlight on the conversations that they want to be had about racism, police brutality, and everything going on in the world right now. We spoke to the players today, and they made it clear that their goal here was to show solidarity with the Black players in the league, and also to try to spark these conversations. So in the here and now, obviously the Flyers are in the middle of a playoff series. It's 1-1. They're going to play game 3 on Saturday, and I'm sure it's going to be a great game. But the players definitely made it clear today that right now the focus is on these conversations they want to be had, and not the not the game that's coming up tomorrow.
You had some tweets about comments from Claude Giroux that caught my attention in terms of how he's internalized it and the conversations he's had. Can you talk to our listeners a little bit about what he told you about the situation?
Yeah. I think he one thing that he said that was interesting to me was about, just in his mind, the importance of having these conversations. He talked about having these conversations over the last few months with his teammates, with his wife. And I think that was something you heard from a lot of the players over the last 24 or so hours, is just the belief that talking these things out is the right next step. That's how they came to this conclusion of pausing the playoffs for 2 days. It was, all these players are in the bubble. They're all together. Obviously, I guess there's 2 of them. So there's the Toronto bubble and the Edmonton bubble, but they came to this conclusion and this decision as a group, talking within the bubble. And I think one of the main points that that Giroux made, that James Van Riemsdyk made, that Scott Lawton made today, and Matt Niskanen as well, is just the importance of those conversations. So it's definitely a unique day for the NHL. Obviously, the NHL has a reputation of kind of putting its head down and not maybe rocking the boat. There's obviously hockey culture and whatnot, but based on, as you said, what Giroux said, there's a feeling on the part of the players in particular, because they were the ones that spearheaded this, that they want to try to facilitate more of these conversations happening.
The fact that they're in the bubble, Charlie, does that lead to better conversation among the players? Have the players said anything about whether or not this situation has brought them closer together, not just as hockey players and teammates, but has brought them closer together as far as understanding and having empathy towards what's going on?
I mean, I think it definitely has. I believe it was JBR who was asked a question like that about whether being in the bubble has made this, I guess, different than it would be if this was just a normal playoff. And I absolutely think that that's the case. You have players like Ryan Reeves for Vegas, who he took a stand earlier in the playoffs. He's been having these conversations. I believe Van Riemsdyk said that they had also spoken to, or I think it might have been Giroux, they'd also spoken to Matt Dumba, another Black player. So there's I think there's a feeling that that these conversations are probably easier to have in the bubble, because everybody's together and it's a lot easier to connect with people. So yeah, I absolutely think that the unique nature of these playoffs has probably facilitated this.
Okay, well, with everything else that's going on, there is hockey. There has been hockey this week. There has been some good and there has been some bad when it comes to the Flyers. Let's talk the good. The Flyers jumped out to a 3-0 lead in that game. What facilitated that kind of burst, and then what happened?
Yeah, I think the first period of game 2, you saw the star players in the Flyers finally play their best hockey. That's been kind of a recurring theme throughout this postseason, even as the Flyers, took down the Montreal Canadiens in 6 games, was that their star players, Giroux, Sean Couturier, Kevin Hayes to a degree. These were guys who, Travis Konechny as well, who was their top scorer. These are guys that weren't necessarily producing as much offensively, particularly in the goals department, as maybe there was an expectation they should. And I think what happened in the beginning of game 2 was that those guys really stepped up and made it clear that they're going to have an impact in the series. Kevin Hayes scored twice. Sean Couturier had a great goal, great individual effort, going basically right through the Islanders defenseman Nick Leddy, and then beating the Islanders goalie Semyon Varlamov. So that was how they really, took the lead. I think the rest of the game, was a combination of the Islanders playing really well and the Flyers just proving unable to get that one last goal that probably would have put the game on ice. The star players kept playing well, but they weren't, nobody made that one big play in regulation. And the Islanders took advantage of the Flyers' third and fourth lines to really put a lot of pressure on the, on the defense and whatnot. And obviously they chipped away at the lead, took it to overtime. And, if the Flyers lose that game, it's hard to say anything in absolutes, but there's a good chance the series is over. You lose that game, you're down 2-0, you blew a 3-0 lead. It's hard to imagine them coming back. You win that game, which they did with Phil Myers scoring the dramatic goal in overtime, and now it's a 1-1 series. Now it's a best of 5, and now you can reset and try to figure out, okay, how do we carry over the good things from game 2, fix the bad things, and then try to go out there and win game 3 and take control of the series.
You mentioned the game winner from Phil Myers. He's a +7 so far in the series. Can you talk about the impact of him and some of the other younger players with some of the big names kind of scuffling and struggling so far in the playoffs for the team?
Yeah, I think what's important about not just about Phil Myers, but about a lot of the young guys is that, game 2, I wrote about this in my column after the game. It felt like for really the first time in these playoffs, like the formula for how the Flyers need to succeed was really spelled out, which is you have the veteran players, the stars on the team. They have to pull they have to carry the load. They have to, do their fair share because they're the guys that everybody looks to. But then you need the supporting cast. You need the next generation of young players kind of helping them across the finish line. Because that's the help that, Giroux and Voracek and Couturier, they didn't get that help for years and years and years. Well, now you've got guys like Phil Myers. You've got guys like Travis Sanheim. You've got guys, like Carter Hart, who I guess one could argue he's one of the stars on this team, but he's certainly a young player who hasn't reached his prime yet. Those are the guys that need that's what's different about this Flyers team than maybe a 3-4 years ago Flyers team. 3-4 years ago, the star players didn't have guys like that. Well, this time, if you remember the game-winning goal from Phil Myers, Sean Couturier had a chance 5 seconds before to end the game, and he missed the net. And maybe 3 years ago, he misses the net, and then 3 minutes later, the Islanders score the game winner, and you're like, oh, God, Couturier could have won it, and he blew it. Well, what happens? Couturier misses the net. The Flyers gather the puck. Phil Myers takes a shot and wins the game. And that's the kind of, obviously the Flyers don't get to overtime if Sean Couturier isn't playing as well as he did. But the Flyers don't win that game if Phil Myers isn't there to pick up Sean Couturier when he made one of his few errors in the game. And I think that's important to understanding how this Flyers team has to succeed.
It seems like they're a team that's learning how to win at this level. The playoff hockey, there's nothing like it, the intensity that ratchets up. And you talked about where they would be if they had gone down 2-0 in the series after going ahead 3-0 in the game. The importance of going up 2-1 in the series in their Flyers history. They're 21-3 in a series when they lead 2-1. They're 7-22 when they trail. Can you talk about what you expect to see in the game tomorrow now that we know that we're going to have a Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday kind of schedule going forward to these games?
Yeah, it's really tough to say how this is going to play out because I think the Flyers took a step forward in game 2. I think it was huge that they've got the big guns, starting to fire again, which is, something they were going to need to win this series. But, the Flyers really, since the start of the actual playoffs, I'm not counting the round robin games as true playoff games, the Flyers really haven't had that one game where they just played their absolute best from start to finish. They've had games where they played against Montreal. Montreal had that game in game 2 and they blew out the Flyers. But the Flyers haven't had that one game where you came away from it thinking, man, they dominated that game. And I feel like they're going to need a game like that. I think they're trending upwards. And I think that, game 2, as I said, was a positive sign. But the Islanders are playing really good hockey right now. And the Islanders, I think, are playing much closer to their ceiling than the Flyers are. Now, the positive of that is that I think the Flyers have more to give than the Islanders can, but the Flyers have to get there, and they haven't been there yet. Again, game 2 was closer because you had those top guys firing on all cylinders. Carter Hart was his usual self and whatnot, but the Flyers need to reach that next level, I think, to beat this Islanders team, because this Islanders team, they're forechecking really well. They're playing great defense. They're extremely well coached. Maybe you could have beaten the Montreal Canadiens playing 70% of your capabilities, but if they want to take down the Islanders in this series, they're going to have to be playing pretty close to 100% to lock down the series. And I'm hopeful they can do it. I think they're capable of doing it, but they still have to go out there and do it. And I think that's going to be key for these next few games.
How important is the coach as far as his experience and his personality to the way the Flyers are playing and progressing?
Well, I think Alain Vigneault definitely brought a sense of structure to the Flyers, and a sense of accountability that they maybe lacked under the previous coaching regime. That's something you've heard from a lot of the players this year, is just how prepared they are for games, how well conditioned they are because of the practice strategies that Vigneault and his coaching staff have implemented. So I absolutely think it's been a big part of it. There's a sense of, and I'm not saying this to throw Dave Haxtell, the Flyers former head coach, under the bus or anything, but there's a benefit you have to having coached in the NHL for years and years and years. And Dave Haxtell, in a sense, he came from college. He was learning on the fly how to be a successful NHL head coach. And that's not a problem with Alain Vigneault, who's been in this league for decades, and he's gotten teams to the Cup final. He's won divisions. He's won conference titles. He knows all the little things of how to motivate players, of how to, control a room and things like that the past regime was probably still trying to figure out exactly the best ways to do it. So I think getting a guy like Vigneault has been huge. He's a nominee for the Jack Adams Award for best coach, and he absolutely deserves to be. I think it's been huge for this team, and it's a big part of why they've been successful.
What's the feel of the NHL? It seems like they're one of the leagues that kind of got this right with their bubble, no positive tests that they've been there, some great hockey that's been put on, fantastic games that have really gone back and forth in their series. Is the NHL happy with what they're seeing right now?
I think they are. I think they're, obviously there was some skepticism about these bubbles. It's something that really has never been tried before. So no one really knew how it was going to work, but I think in this case, you have to give the players a lot of credit, especially in my mind, for making it through the phase 3, which was training camp, because I remember thinking that was what I was the most worried about, because if you can get all the players into the bubble and you can get them all kind of together and nobody's failed a coronavirus test, no one has the virus, I thought you were probably going to be okay. The thing was with phase 3 was that these guys were in training camps in their home cities, and they could really do whatever they wanted. If they wanted to, go out to a big party or something, or not, take this seriously, they could. And then they might have gotten the coronavirus, and it might have thrown this whole thing for a loop. But I think you have to give the players across the league credit, because they took this seriously enough that didn't happen. No one brought the virus into the bubble, and that allowed for everybody to get in there safely, and then for hockey to get rolling again. So, obviously give all the credit in the world to the NHL, for their planning and the presentation, which I think has been, much better than even I expected it was going to be. I think, it's a little bit different without fans, but there's still a lot of intensity in those games. So credit the NHL, but I think you also have to give a lot of credit to the players for taking this seriously even before they got into the bubble, because if they didn't, we wouldn't be having this tournament right now.
Gary Bettman doesn't exactly have the best long-term reputation, but has survived in the NHL for a long time. Does he get a lot of credit for the fact that they're making it through this?
I think he does. And I've been critical of Gary Bettman in the past, without a doubt. But one thing you also have to recognize is that the players, and this was justified on their part, they made it clear that they were not going to agree to a return to play and a bubble process if they didn't come to an agreement, with the NHL on a new collective bargaining agreement, because the collective bargaining agreement was scheduled to expire at the end of next season. And they basically were like, we're going to use a little bit of leverage here. We're going to say that, we want labor peace if we're going to, put ourselves at risk and go back out there and play hockey in the middle of a pandemic. Well, the NHL and the NHLPA agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement. It's going to last for, I believe, another 5 years. And that's, if we're going to criticize Gary Bettman, and I think some criticism is deserved, for the work stoppages that have happened under his watch, you also have to give him credit for this one, because this doesn't happen without a new CBA being agreed to. And the NHL and the NHLPA were able to pull it off. And Bettman, obviously, as commissioner of the league, is a huge part of that.
Charlie, always appreciate the time that you give us. Wish you continued health, and look forward to seeing your coverage at the Athletic Philadelphia on Twitter. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.